December 15th, 1943. The Mitsubishi Heavy Industries shipyard in Nagasaki hummed with the familiar rhythm of riveting hammers and welding torches as Chief Naval Engineer Takeshi Yamamoto stood before a half-completed destroyer hull, watching workers struggle to install outdated equipment with tools that had seen better days. The morning fog rolled in from the harbor, carrying with it the acrid smell of coal smoke and the distant sound of air raid sirens testing their weekly routine. Yamamoto believed, as did most of his colleagues, that Japanese craftsmanship and dedication would ultimately prevail over American industrial might through superior quality and fighting spirit. Little did he know that on this very morning, American shipyards were completing their 150th vessel of the year, while his own facility had managed to finish only its third. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the remarkable account of how Japanese engineers discovered the true scale of American industrial production during the conflict, and how this revelation would forever change their understanding of modern warfare and manufacturing. Yamamoto had spent 32 years perfecting his craft at Mitsubishi, rising through the ranks from a junior draftsman to the chief engineer responsible for overseeing destroyer construction. His weathered hands bore the calluses of countless hours spent examining blueprints and inspecting hull plates, and his reputation for precision had earned him the respect of workers throughout the facility. On this particular morning, he carried with him a letter from the Naval Ministry requesting an updated production schedule for the remaining months of 1943. The statistics were sobering, though Yamamoto didn't yet understand their true significance. His shipyard, one of Japan's most productive, had completed 3 destroyers since January, with a 4th vessel scheduled for completion in late February of 1944. Each ship required approximately 8 months from keel laying to sea trials, utilizing the skills of over 2,000 workers and consuming materials that were becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. As Yamamoto walked through the facility that morning, he noticed the subtle signs of material shortages that had been growing more apparent with each passing month. The steel plates arriving from the mills were thinner than specifications called for, requiring additional reinforcement that added weeks to construction schedules. Copper wiring had been replaced with aluminum alternatives that proved less reliable but were the only materials available. Most troubling of all, the skilled welders and riveters were being reassigned to aircraft production, leaving less experienced workers to handle critical hull assembly tasks. Senior foreman Hiroshi Tanaka approached Yamamoto near the bow section of the destroyer currently under construction, carrying a clipboard thick with production reports and material requisitions. Tanaka had worked at the yard for 26 years and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of every process involved in ship construction. His expression carried the weight of someone bearing difficult news. "Honorable Chief Engineer," Tanaka said with a slight bow, "the steel delivery scheduled for this week has been delayed again. The mill reports that raw materials are being redirected to aircraft production facilities." Yamamoto studied the requisition forms, noting that this marked the 4th delay in 6 weeks. Each postponement meant longer construction times and increased costs. But more importantly, it meant fewer vessels available for the Imperial Navy at a time when replacements were desperately needed. The arithmetic was becoming impossible to ignore. Japanese shipyards were struggling to maintain production levels while facing mounting material and labor shortages. What Yamamoto and his colleagues didn't realize was that 3,000 miles away, American shipyards were operating under entirely different circumstances. At the Kaiser Richmond shipyard in California, Supervisor James Mitchell was reviewing production figures that would have seemed impossible to Japanese engineers. The facility had completed its 28th Liberty ship of the year just 3 days earlier, with another vessel scheduled for launch the following week. The scale of American production was staggering in ways that extended far beyond simple numbers. The Richmond yard employed over 90,000 workers operating in 3 shifts around the clock, utilizing mass production techniques adapted from automobile manufacturing. Where Japanese shipbuilders relied on traditional craftsmanship and individualized construction methods, American facilities had embraced standardization and prefabrication on an unprecedented scale. Mitchell walked through the assembly area, where massive hull sections were being welded together, using techniques that prioritized speed over traditional craftsmanship. Prefabricated components arrived at the shipway, already fitted with piping, electrical systems and internal structures, allowing entire sections to be installed in days rather than weeks. The welding process itself had been revolutionized through the use of automatic machinery and specialized techniques that could join steel plates faster than any human welder, regardless of skill level. The contrast in materials availability was equally dramatic. American steel mills were producing over 89 million tons annually by 1943, with much of this output specifically allocated to shipbuilding programs. Quality control standards ensured that steel plates met exact specifications without requiring field modifications or reinforcement. Copper, aluminum, and other critical materials flowed to shipyards in quantities that exceeded requirements, eliminating the delays and substitutions that plagued Japanese facilities. Back in Nagasaki, Yamamoto was unaware of these American capabilities as he reviewed his facility's monthly production meeting. The conference room overlooked the harbor where 3 completed destroyers waited for sea trials that had been postponed due to fuel shortages. Around the table sat his senior staff, Assistant Engineer Kenji Watanabe, Production Manager Satoshi Nakamura, and Quality Control Supervisor Masaki Sato, each representing different aspects of the shipbuilding process. Watanabe presented the latest projections, indicating that the current vessel under construction would require an additional 6 weeks beyond the original schedule due to material delays and labor reassignments. The mathematics were becoming increasingly unfavorable. Longer construction times, reduced material quality, and fewer skilled workers meant that production capacity was actually declining even as demand increased. The Naval Ministry expects 4 vessels completed by year's end, Nakamura observed, consulting his production charts. At our current pace, we might manage 3 if all material deliveries arrive on schedule. Sato added his concerns about quality control issues resulting from material substitutions and inexperienced workers. The aluminum wiring installations require twice as many inspection hours as copper systems, he explained, and the hull plate thickness variations are creating structural concerns that require additional reinforcement. What none of these engineers understood was that American shipyards were not merely producing more vessels, they were revolutionizing the entire concept of ship construction through industrial techniques that Japanese facilities had never considered. The Kaiser yards had reduced Liberty ship construction time from 350 days to an average of 42 days through assembly line methods and standardized components. The revelation of American production capabilities would come through an unexpected source. Captured documents recovered from an American submarine that had been forced to surface near Japanese waters in early 1944. Among the papers were production reports and logistical summaries that provided Japanese intelligence officers with their first accurate picture of American industrial output. Lieutenant Commander Yoshio Fujiwara, a naval intelligence officer specializing in enemy production analysis, was assigned to review these documents in his cramped office at Navy headquarters in Tokyo. What he discovered in those typewritten pages would fundamentally challenge everything Japanese military planners believed about American capabilities. The numbers were so extraordinary that Fujiwara initially assumed they were propaganda or deliberate misinformation designed to mislead Japanese intelligence. According to the captured reports, American shipyards had completed over 1,400 vessels of various types during 1943 alone. Liberty ships, which formed the backbone of the merchant fleet, were being produced at a rate of 3 vessels per day across all American yards combined. Fujiwara spent weeks verifying these figures through other intelligence sources, cross-referencing captured documents, radio intercepts, and reconnaissance reports. Each additional piece of evidence confirmed, rather than refuted, the staggering scale of American production. The United States was producing ships at a rate that exceeded Japanese capabilities by a factor of more than 50 to 1. The implications extended far beyond simple numerical superiority. American production methods represented a fundamental difference in approach to industrial warfare. Where Japanese facilities focused on individual craftsmanship and quality through traditional methods, American yards had embraced mass production techniques that sacrificed some individual attention for overwhelming quantity and speed. When Fujiwara's report reached senior naval officers, the initial reaction was disbelief, followed by demands for additional verification. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Chief of the Naval General Staff, personally reviewed the intelligence summary and requested independent confirmation through diplomatic sources and neutral country contacts. The confirmation came through Swiss intelligence contacts and Swedish maritime observers who provided corroborating evidence of American shipbuilding capabilities. Photographs of American shipyards showed facilities that dwarfed anything in Japan, with multiple vessels under construction simultaneously and production lines that operated continuously. The psychological impact of this revelation on Japanese engineers and naval planners cannot be overstated. Yamamoto received a classified briefing on American production capabilities in March of 1944, and the experience fundamentally changed his understanding of modern industrial warfare. "The Americans are not building ships," Yamamoto told his staff after returning from the briefing. "They are manufacturing them like automobiles on an assembly line. Their yards complete more vessels in a single week than we finish in 6 months." The technical details were equally sobering. American yards utilized prefabrication techniques that allowed major hull sections to be assembled away from the shipway, then transported and installed using massive cranes and specialized equipment. This approach reduced construction time while maintaining structural integrity through standardized engineering specifications. Watanabe struggled to comprehend the scale of American operations. "How is such production possible?" he asked during a staff meeting where the implications were being discussed. "Do they have unlimited materials and workers?" The answer, as Yamamoto had learned during his briefing, was that American industrial capacity had been specifically designed for mass production warfare. The country's peacetime manufacturing infrastructure had been rapidly converted and expanded to support military production goals, with automobile factories retooled for aircraft production and steel mills expanded to meet shipbuilding demands. American yards employed over 700,000 workers by 1943, compared to approximately 60,000 in all Japanese shipbuilding facilities combined. The workforce included women, minorities, and older workers who had been trained in accelerated programs to perform specific shipbuilding tasks. This approach contrasted sharply with Japanese methods, which relied on traditional apprenticeship systems and skilled craftsmen whose training required years to complete. The standardization of design was perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of American production methods. Liberty ships utilized identical specifications across all construction yards, allowing components to be manufactured at separate facilities and assembled at the shipway. This interchangeability meant that a propeller manufactured in Detroit could be installed in a hull being built in California without any modifications or adjustments. Japanese shipbuilding, by contrast, relied on customized approaches where each vessel was essentially a unique construction project, requiring individual attention and specialized components. While this method produced high-quality ships, it also meant that construction could not be easily accelerated or standardized across multiple facilities. The materials logistics also revealed fundamental differences in industrial approaches. American steel mills were producing specialized grades of ship plate steel in quantities that exceeded Japan's total annual steel output. The integrated supply chain ensured that materials arrived at shipyards according to precise schedules, eliminating the delays and shortages that plagued Japanese construction projects. Nakamura attempted to calculate whether Japanese methods could be adapted to achieve similar production rates. His analysis revealed that fundamental changes would be required in everything from worker training to facility design to materials procurement. The traditional apprenticeship system could not produce skilled workers quickly enough to staff expanded operations, and Japanese steel mills lacked the capacity to support mass production shipbuilding. Even if we could obtain unlimited materials, Nakamura concluded, Our construction methods would require years to adapt to mass production techniques. The Americans designed their entire approach specifically for quantity and speed. The quality question also presented interesting contrasts. Japanese engineers initially assumed that American mass production methods must result in inferior vessels, but intelligence reports suggested otherwise. Liberty ships, despite their rapid construction, were proving seaworthy and reliable in Atlantic service. The standardized design had been engineered specifically for mass production while maintaining adequate performance characteristics. Sato's quality control expertise led him to study American inspection and testing procedures described in the captured documents. They inspect components before installation rather than after, he observed. This prevents defects from being built into the structure and reduces the time required for corrections. This approach represented another fundamental difference in manufacturing philosophy. Japanese construction methods emphasized individual craftsmanship and post-construction inspection to ensure quality, while American yards utilized quality control processes designed to prevent defects during the construction process itself. The economic implications were equally staggering. American shipbuilding costs per vessel had decreased even as production increased, demonstrating the efficiency gains possible through mass production techniques. Japanese costs, by contrast, had increased as materials became scarce and construction times extended due to various shortages. As spring turned to summer in 1944, the full implications of American industrial superiority became apparent to Japanese engineers and military planners. The revelation that America had built over 150 major vessels, while Japan had completed 3 during the same period, was not simply a matter of numerical difference. It represented a fundamental transformation in how modern warfare could be conducted. Yamamoto found himself questioning assumptions that had guided his entire career. The dedication and skill that he had always believed would overcome material disadvantages were proving insufficient against opponents who could produce overwhelming quantities of adequate equipment faster than high-quality alternatives could be constructed. The human cost of this industrial revolution was not lost on Japanese observers. American shipyards had achieved their production goals through intensive labor that operated around the clock, utilizing workers who had been rapidly trained for specific tasks rather than traditional apprenticeship methods. The social mobilization required to staff these facilities represented a transformation of American society that matched the scale of industrial change. Tanaka, the senior foreman whose experience spanned 3 decades of shipbuilding, struggled to comprehend how such rapid production could be achieved without sacrificing fundamental quality. In America, they must work with different standards, he told his work crew. Speed has become more important than individual perfection. This observation touched on a crucial philosophical difference between Japanese and American approaches to wartime production. Japanese methods emphasized individual excellence and traditional craftsmanship, while American facilities had embraced systematic efficiency and standardized procedures designed to achieve acceptable quality through mass production. The psychological impact on Japanese workers was significant as they realized that their individual skills and dedication, however exceptional, could not compete with systematic mass production. The pride in craftsmanship that had motivated generations of Japanese shipbuilders was being challenged by an entirely different approach to manufacturing. By August of 1944, the reality of American production superiority had fundamentally altered Japanese naval planning. The original strategy of using superior training and equipment to overcome numerical disadvantages was clearly inadequate when facing opponents who could replace losses at rates that exceeded Japanese production by factors of 50 to 1 or more. Engineer Watanabe summarized the situation during a staff meeting where long-term planning was being discussed. "We cannot build ships faster than they can sink them," he stated simply. Their production capacity makes traditional naval strategy impossible to implement. This realization marked a turning point in Japanese understanding of modern industrial warfare. The conflict had become a contest of productive capacity rather than individual skill or tactical excellence, and American industrial might had proven capable of overwhelming any advantages in training or equipment quality. The technical lessons learned from studying American methods would influence Japanese industrial planning for decades after the conflict ended. The efficiency of mass production, the importance of standardized design, and the benefits of integrated supply chains represented concepts that challenged traditional Japanese manufacturing approaches. Yamamoto's final report to the Naval Ministry acknowledged that American shipbuilding capabilities represented a new form of warfare where industrial capacity determines strategic outcomes more decisively than individual courage or tactical skill. This assessment would prove prophetic as the conflict continued to demonstrate the decisive importance of productive capacity in modern military operations. The transformation in understanding was complete when Japanese engineers realized that American yards were not simply building more ships. They were demonstrating an entirely new approach to industrial organization that could be applied to any manufacturing challenge. The implications extended far beyond shipbuilding to encompass fundamental questions about how modern societies could mobilize their resources for large-scale projects. In his private journal, Yamamoto wrote that, "The Americans have shown us that quantity can become its own form of quality when properly organized. Their ships may not be individually superior to ours, but their ability to produce them in overwhelming numbers creates strategic advantages that individual excellence cannot overcome." The final irony was that Japanese engineers, despite their initial shock at American production capabilities, came to respect the systematic efficiency that had achieved such remarkable results. The mass production methods that had initially seemed crude compared to traditional craftsmanship were revealed as sophisticated approaches to complex manufacturing challenges. As 1944 drew to a close, Yamamoto stood once again before a half-completed destroyer hull in the Nagasaki shipyard. The vessel represented months of skilled labor and careful attention to detail, but he now understood that American yards had completed dozens of similar ships during the same period, using different methods and approaches. The morning fog rolled in from the harbor, as it had countless times before. But Yamamoto's perspective on shipbuilding and industrial warfare had been forever changed. The revelation of American production capabilities had demonstrated that modern conflicts would be decided as much in factories and shipyards as on battlefields, and that productive capacity had become the ultimate strategic weapon. The workers around him continued their careful craftsmanship, unaware that their individual efforts, however skilled and dedicated, were part of a larger contest where systematic mass production had already determined the outcome. American shipyards had built 150 vessels while Japan had completed 3, and this numerical reality would prove more decisive than any differences in individual quality or craftsmanship. The transformation was complete. Japanese engineers had learned that in modern industrial warfare, the ability to produce adequate equipment in overwhelming quantities could overcome any advantages in individual excellence or traditional methods. This lesson would reshape their understanding of manufacturing, strategy, and the relationship between industrial capacity and military power for generations to come. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.